Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Aisala.
Oops. Hello, welcome to the very second Business as Unusual podcast with Dr. Darian Parker. So excited to have you here today. And then we'll put this up later as well, but I'm hopeful that people will get as much out of talking to you as I did when I was on your show. Are you up for introducing yourself to folks?
Sure, yeah, no problem. Happy to do it. So Dr. Darian Parker, and I've been in the fitness business for now 21 years. Doesn't feel like it, but it's, I guess technically it's a pretty long time. And I've served a couple different roles within this 21 years. I've been a personal trainer the entire time, but a fitness executive for about 15, 16 years of it. And I've also worked in the university and career college system. So in academia with certifying personal trainers and teaching all matter of courses like exercise physiology, psychology of fitness, things of that nature. And then currently I own 3 different businesses. 2 are more fitness-based, consulting and management and fitness. One's personal training and the other is a newer wellness enthusiast platform. So that's hopefully in a nutshell. It wasn't too long.
Mm-hmm. No, it's great. Well, and I know that one of the things that we'll get into a little bit more is, and part of why I clicked with you is that awareness of intersectionality, which I know is a buzzword. And at the same time, my personal experience is that there's a siloing that occurs, and the ways in which you bring in like fitness, like the physical, the academic, and the social, that feels so valuable to me as a person in the world, because we are all those things. None of us is siloed. We're not just physical or social or emotional. We're all of it. So I wanted to give people a chance to get to know you a little bit. I'll also share, I was a runner for a long time, and my favorite running quote is, "Life is short, running makes it seem longer," because that was I'd be out there going, okay,
man.
So, but like, how did you step from that, from run, like, because I was reading some of the things on your website. I'm sure there's more to it than what was there. That's where you kind of started in that space, and then it obviously expanded. So what was that? What was the step that took you to that expansion?
I think it was always kind of going to be that for me. I grew up running. I always loved running. Like, I wouldn't say like long distance running. I wasn't necessarily into that. I think that's a lot of what running is, recreational distance running. I was always playing a lot of different sports growing up. And then I think about my 9th grade year, we were living in Georgia and we were watching the Olympics, and my mom was like, you're really fast. Like, you should try out for like track and field. And I was like, okay. And I did. And I was pretty good from the beginning. And then we ended up moving to Virginia. And then I became a really good track and field athlete. Then I got a scholarship to run track in college as a sprinter. And during that whole time, I always knew I wanted to be in fitness on some level. I didn't necessarily know I wanted to be like in personal training or like what was the pathway. I just wanted to be involved in that world. And so running to me was just kind of doing that was just a natural offshoot. It's like, oh, I'm going to run. Then I started with coaching runners. I was a collegiate track and field coach for a little bit. So I'm very experienced in coaching different runners. And I was recently on a podcast, Martha Runs the World, which was all about running, and was talking to her about the running culture The whole thing was
Mhm.
about running, which was great because I haven't talked about that in a long time.
Yeah.
But then the first job I did, which was in a faculty staff fitness center at James Madison University, that's when I fell in love with training. First time working with people back in 2001. And I was
Mm.
like, I think this is kind of where it's headed for me. And that just began the explosion of stuff in my life with fitness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can say like a good coach is such a gift for any, because it's so hard to assess where you need to push yourself in a
Yeah.
situation. I definitely followed my own regimens, that I also work with trainers at times, because it was that someone outside of me who could assess, like, oh, you could go further, or maybe you should not push it right now. And
Yeah.
that outside perspective is so valuable. I think in everything. But I think you
Yes.
can notice it in something like fitness much more quickly. What hobby of yours do you think would most surprise folks you know?
Probably my hobby of poetry that I have. I think a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
people, it's on my website, but like
Mhm.
before I was like heavily in the business, I wrote several poetry books that were published, and I really like doing. I don't do it as much anymore, but it's just a nice creative outlet.
Yeah.
I think also that like I think sometimes fitness people can be stereotyped into like this like ultra into the gym all the time, eating a certain way, but I consider myself not part of that environment. Like
Yeah.
I like to be like lay on the ground and watch TV for long periods of time, to be kind of like not move for like hours on end and stuff. Like I enjoy series and it's like I love watching TV. I know sometimes my colleagues are like, I never watch TV. I'm like, oh, I love watching TV. Like I'm not,
Like,
yeah. You'll never
what's
see
some
me
of
out there
your
all the time, like working out. It's
Mhm.
like I understand the science behind it to maximize it, but I don't like live gym culture and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's an important distinction to understand. Is I do feel like we have a tendency to extremism, especially in our reporting, and it happens. You get obsessed with things,
Yeah.
and recognizing that actually fitness and what you were saying, gym culture, like that's a different thing. Like you can be a fit
Yeah.
person, you could be a trainer, and you don't have to be doing this other stuff. And for some people, that's a choice. For some people, maybe they think that's the only
Right.
way. But just recognizing there's a distinction between those. That's I think. Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's really important to put out there.
I think it's a big thing because a lot of the young people who are in fitness, I think they see through Instagram and all this stuff. It's like the gym life, gym culture. Everybody's in the gym all the time, but I think it doesn't appeal to the reality of living.
Mhm.
I think and being in the world, and that especially when you're young, you don't have as much going on in your life, and then once you start
Mhm.
having a lot of other things come into your life, you have to learn to adjust, and you can't always be in the gym all the time.
Right. There's other things you have to go
Yeah.
work with. Well, so one thing I asked you about, to if we could take some time to talk about, is the CDC uh, recently added physical inactivity to their list of pre-existing conditions, which um, I'm interested to hear your perspective on that, and then to talk maybe a little bit about what the possible implications of that would be. I was reading through their website and I'm like, they're making recommendations. Like, I'll share when my kids were in school, they didn't have recess. Like, they had like 20 minutes a day of physical activity. I'm like, this is insanity.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that they're noting that it's a problem, but I'm curious. So I'm curious from that, both the specifics and then also your experience and observations, whatever comes to mind for you.
I think I have a very different idea about this than the majority of my colleagues. And
Yeah.
I think it probably upsets some of my colleagues, but I'd like to be realistic about life. So physical activity being on that list, well, so is diabetes and
Hmm.
cardiovascular disease. And those numbers are not going down. The number of people who have diabetes is not diving down because it's listed as a pre-existing condition or disease that it's preventable, and that it's these statistics and these things from the CDC actually don't mean much to me.
Hmm.
I think for the average consumer, it actually means nothing to them. the general population, it doesn't make the news. It doesn't
No.
make a real imprint in their life at all. So I think it's just talk in general. And I'm on a lot of committees, and I talk to a lot of people in the higher ups and these types of things. And I've told them, I said, it's just more talking, but there's no real action associated with it. So I'm not sure the value of it, honestly. It's just like there's a report about how, like, if everyone moved 10 more minutes a day, 100,000 less people would die a year. That sounds good, right? It sounds like very community, like earth, like amazing. But in the reality, I don't think most people care about that. I don't think it doesn't hit them in a way that makes everybody want to do something about it on a large scale for that. So I think it's much of the same. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. It's nice that it's in there, but didn't you already know that? I mean, like, being physically inactive is not good for you. And also, didn't you already know that working out and taking care of yourself is good for you? You could line up 30 people and all 30 people will tell you, yes, it's good to be active. That doesn't mean they're going to do it. So there's a messaging problem, I feel.
No, I think that's a fair assessment. I feel like it's true. Like, if you were to ask 10 people, do you think that physical activity benefits your health? You get varying degrees of enthusiasm around it. You'd be like, yeah, or but but most people would say yes. And so when I was in high school, I had the opportunity to be an exchange student. I lived in Europe, and I lost like 15 pounds, and I was not a heavy kid. But the way we ate, the fact that, like, there was so much more integrated walking in your day, like the way as a teenager I could get around everywhere and I did not need a car. I just biked or took the public transit and such. And our social, and the one thing that I see from stuff like this is when we take common sense and we codify it into a suggestion or a policy, it can then be used to inform practices, right? Like, they could say, okay, schools have to give kids some time outside or, whatever. That has not been happening because we've been so fixated on academics and STEM, which I also think are important. But we took I shouldn't say all, but many systems took a lot of the physical activity out to focus on, without really necessarily considering the whole package, right?
Right.
So what do you think so as a trainer and as a person who's been working in this, what do you see as the consistent barrier between people knowing and engaging in that?
I think the consistent barrier is the message. The messaging is completely wrong, and it's our fault in the business. It's our fault. Like, we have, the whole thing's like, look at yourself in the mirror, and like, maybe it's your fault. I think it's our fault. I think there's a growing level of deconstruction. If people are honest in our business, it's like we've played a large role in that. We're a very gimmick-based business. It's a 30, 60, 90-day type of result type of thing. We've allowed that type of information and that type of influence to become the majority of the message in our business. The purely aesthetic aspect of it, social media, I think, has done massive damage to fitness culture and portraying a very non-realistic version of what it actually means to be fit or to be well. I also think that we have no real definitions for health. The health definition is completely vague. You can have someone who portrays online that they eat well and they're in the gym all the time, but maybe that person has really poor coping skills. They sleep horribly. They have zero environmental sensitivity. That's not a well person. That person is good at a couple of different things on the spectrum of it. So I think also the message needs to be, we've dropped the ball on the message that exercise, physical activity, movement, all these things are not natural. In the current version of what we're doing, they're highly irregular to humans. And to telling people you're not lazy, you're just trying to overcome this natural instinct to not expend calories in the current version of how we're doing it. This is not how we biologically and anthropologically have spent our calories. We hunted,
Right.
gathered, survived, reproduced. And the other thing I think the barrier is technology is also a facilitator and a barrier. The technology is creating more opportunity, but at the same time, it's making life way too convenient for people. So the
Right.
convenience part, people will always go to the path of least resistance. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
making life so convenient where you don't have to go out and get anything and everything can come to you, you're starting to take the activity out of living. And so I think we're at this kind of weird crossroads where like everything in life is actually statistically, generally speaking, getting better. But on the other hand, we're doing things that are making us actually less want to actually be active at the same time. So there's going to be a fork in the road here because the statistics have not changed in 30, 40 years. 15 to 80% of the population exercises regularly. And even they had to adjust the exercise guidelines a few years ago to just basically just do something because nobody's doing anything. You know?
Right.
So to me, there's a lot of barriers for it.
No, I think I agree. It's interesting because like I said, I was a runner and I was actually at the time, I would say an actual athlete, which I didn't at the time define myself as that. And so then later on, I had an injury and I was trying to get, I would say, back to that level of functionality, but I didn't think of it as athletic. So I had really unrealistic expectations for what I could achieve when it was like, and I had to sort of recognize like, I actually climbed Mount Adams on a weekend with a friend without preparing for it and had no problem. I was in really good shape. That's not going to happen today. And so I was like, all right. Like that, that aware, like matching the expectation with your life, with what you can do, and a motivation process. Like, how do you motivate yourself? Like you stay fit, obviously it's part of your work, but there has to be days when you're like, I really don't want to do this.
I think there's a lot of days like that for most people. I mean, regardless of whether they're in the business or not. I mean, and a good 12 years of my time in the business, I was running a facility and hiring trainers all the time. And trainers struggle with being active regularly and doing something that they know scientifically, I need to do these things to cause a change, overload. I need to sleep better. I need to eat well, all these things. Trainers struggle with that. People in the business struggle with that. But I think, for me personally, I think my time as an athlete, a collegiate athlete, was like the ignition for me. Like it was, I got so used to training literally every day for 4 years that I think for me, it feels awkward not to. So it just became part of my life, my lifestyle, where I feel physically not well if I don't train over time. Almost like it's just high for me. And when I work out, I feel a lot better. And so, but I've always loved working hard. Like I'm not really great at like kind of slowing down. Like when I work out, I want it to be punishing. Like, and I recognize that's not normal. I'm like,
it's not everybody.
It's
like,
not
everybody,
but it's generally not the human condition. It's the avoidance of pain and discomfort. I actually like that. I like to move towards that because I think it's important to test yourself on a weekly basis. And I just expand your rib cage. Some people don't expand the rib cage where they're out of breath at all on a weekly basis. That's actually really important for the small intercostal muscles in your rib cage, which are atrophying if you're not actually using, these deep breaths and things of that nature. So for me, I would say I just have it's kind of like always been part of my life. My family, they've been athletes, was working out when I was like 12 with my dad. It's just like part of my life growing up. So it was easy to kind of transition it for me personally in my life.
No, that's a great example. I mean, I think that something you told me when I was on your show is that there's a perception of fitness in our culture and in our communities that is not actually reflective of the level of like participation in fitness activities. That there's a much lower level of actual people out there doing active engagement.
Like
I mean, I guess officially
actually
tracked, right? Yeah. So am I remembering that correctly? And if so, could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that it's also back to the messaging aspect of that. I think we just have really poor definitions of what it means to move, what it means to be physically active, and what it means to exercise. I think like let's say like 25% of the population, according to the CDC, is physically inactive, like no exercise, anything. Okay, if that person started doing any type of regular movement, it would be considered exercise because it's a stimulus they're not used to doing. But if they continue on doing that, but they don't change any of the variables, duration, distance, the intensity, then it becomes physical activity, which in itself is great. I mean, it's great. You're doing something regularly to increase, all of the different systems in your body, move things around. That's great. But you're not exercising if you're not providing a stimulus that's greater than what the body's used to. And this is generally the problem. I don't want to say it's a problem, because if you're doing physical activity regularly, great, good for you. That's great. You're moving your body regularly. You're being physically active. But if you're frustrated because you're not improving, that's because all the parameters are the same. You've not created a stimulus to create a change, or you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well. There's all these variables that come into play to actually have peak performance. It's like when people say I'm an athlete, I'm like, I don't know. I think we need to have a better definition of that. I'm all about definitions. I'm like, what does this mean? And I think that's what gets us in trouble in our society at large, is we have really poor definitions of what it means to be this or that, or American, what this means to be an athlete, what this means to have faith. Like, we just have poor definitions, and that usually riles other people up because they have different definitions, and nobody's explained what a definition of a thing is that we're doing. And exercise, physical activity, is one of the poorest ones, because someone could be, let's say, I'm going to help you with your movement. I'm a movement specialist. What does that actually mean? Like, am I going to help you just to move around your house better and just actually not be inactive? Or am I an exercise specialist, physical activity? You need to tell people what they're actually going to be getting into.
Yeah. No, I think that shared language is actually it's important to establish that. And what you were saying earlier, we don't really have a great definition of what health is. And a lot of times it comes across, like, I have a close friend who's in the military, and he said, ultimately in the military, your physical fitness is like the thing that matters, right? And he said, but so many people have a genetic predisposition to being fit that and he's like, ultimately, in a lot of ways, it ends up privileging that genetic disposition, because as you age, like, for some people, even in an active scenario, some of that's going to shift a little bit. And he said, like, it's like rough to watch it with some soldiers. They're really good, but they don't have that. So they eventually end up deciding, nope, this is too. And so we don't have the distinction around that either. What would you, if you were going to give a definition of health, can I put you on the spot for that?
Yes, please. I will answer anything on the spot.
Okay.
I enjoy that. I don't like preparing this is like the one area I don't like preparing in my life. I just like to let it roll.
You got something, right?
Yeah. I would say that the definition of health, it's a multifactorial wheel encompassing what it means to be well. And so health is creating and it gets kind of tricky, because what are the criteria for being healthy in this wheel? So physical health, social health, emotional health, intellectual health, spiritual, environmental, occupational. I think having a good, again, we're saying what is good and all those things, but having a positive direction or continuous movement towards the apex of each of those areas of your life, you're starting to become healthy. But if it's like, someone may say to me, well, I'm healthy. I have a really great exercise routine, and I eat plant-based. I mean, if I say, well, how many hours a night do you sleep? And they say, well, like, I'm not a good sleeper. I sleep 4 hours a night. I'm like, you're not healthy. Like, that is a hugely big deficiency in your health. Or your occupational health? Oh, I hate my job. Okay, this is not health. Okay, so are you moving towards a better situation on that? So I think in society, we have essentially equated health with almost like absence of disease or being fit and eating well. Pretty much that's it. And we need to get rid of that definition, because those are just a few components of health. It doesn't encompass the entire aspect. And you'll never be perfect in all of these components. But are you actually taking steps to sleep better, to eat well, exercise, or be physically active, to have some level of spiritual component in your life, to be sensitive to some environmental based things in your life? If you're not making steps towards any of those things really, but you're really great at one thing, I don't consider that person to be a healthy person.
Yeah. I think I like that just combination of notice what you're doing and continue to move in a direction that benefits your I guess maybe fulfillment / capacity and resources. I'm going to try to think of, when I first, I would say, made an intentional shift towards health, my first goal was, and you're going to laugh probably, was my statement was, I'm going to make better choices. That's where I started. And my first better choice was, I'm going to eat less, not none, but less raw cookie dough this week.
Okay. I love that.
It was in my early 20s. And I used to make raw cookie dough for my friends. We'd come over and I'd be like, let's have cookie dough for lunch or for a snack or whatever. And I was like, not lunch. I didn't do that. I didn't go that far. And I was like, I'd eat less, and then I slowly through time, now I don't even eat it at all. I mean, it's been a while, but, and it was but I started with better choices. Like I just, how can I make whatever's happening right now into a better choice, whatever that is. And it was a very helpful approach for me to take. Like some folks I think do well with sort of like rigid and dramatic, but I had a goal. Like I would like to be, eating a more balanced diet, and I'd like to eat less sugar. The start of my first better choice is this one thing. And then, and it worked for me. But for some people, I think there's like they need some extreme. But I think what you're talking about, that if you don't have a goal and you don't know what your goal is, then how can you work towards it? And there's a lot of the diet culture stuff can be really challenging, especially my understanding is that they've shown that if you're doing things like fitness training because you're wanting to look a certain way, it's not often as motivating as if some attachment to your health is the underlying like piece. But I don't know if that's true.
Well, I mean, exercising or being physically active to look good is probably one of the worst things you could do. Because you'll never be satisfied with how you look. You'll always want to do more and more. And you're like, well, maybe just a little bit more of this if I do this and that. But tying it to health-based things is good as long as there's some definition of what does that actually mean. It's like if somebody people always come to me like, well, this week I'm going to eat clean. I'm like, what does that mean? I don't even know what that means. Like, but it's such a catchphrase in our culture. I'm eating clean, or, I'm eating plant-based. Okay, well, I'm a carnivore and stuff. I just think it's just like, what happened to like the middle ground and everything, and not being so extreme? Like, yes, generally eating more plants we know through a lot of research is better, but we also know that some people don't do well on plant-based diets. We can't have this extreme view that it's great for everyone. We're all biologically very different in terms of how our body chemistry is and what connects to us and what works for us. Some people on the other side do really well with a carnivore-based diet, and some people do horrible on it. But we can't have these both sides saying our side is the only thing that works for that.
Right.
That's crazy to me. So the diversity of people's gut biome really well. I mean, how do you know? I mean, it's like,
I don't know.
How do you know?
How do you navigate that professionally? Because I feel like I mean, every industry has its gurus, I guess, or extreme, sort of extreme, like this is how it is. How do you, as a trainer and as someone who runs both an online network and all of these different information places, navigate the snake oil guru? I mean, tendency. I mean, because it's not just that people step into that role, it's that lots of folks seek that out. They want someone to just tell them. And sometimes I want that. I want to, I want somebody to say, this is what's going to work for you. So I don't have one thing I don't have to think about.
Yeah.
And it's just not real.
I was actually in a very large conversation about this with one of my clients who's a pretty well-known psychologist. And we were just talking about our different businesses. And we were talking about how like it's really important to decipher about the snake oil person type of thing. It's because it's harder now, because maybe a very long time ago, this person would go from town to town and it would be a big effort to, people would gather around and then start believing in it. And it would be a hard process, kind of a door knocking on doors type of process. That whole process now was completely on anabolic steroids because of the internet. It's so much easier to do that. But I think one of the things is you can look at some key language, okay? Is really important. Yeah, I mean, this is the definition language thing with me. And I think that's because I have a lot of education around this. So I think words are really important in definition. But if somebody's saying, hey, these are the best exercises, that is not true. The best exercise, I don't even know what that means. Like the word best implies that these are the only. These are just like the ultimate things to get, your glutes in better shape, your quads, whatever. But the science, the reality of it is that you could use almost anything that applies a significant load onto your body, and something will change over time. So you can say it's this exercise, is this the only way to get things done? That is completely false. But I get it why people do it, because they're trying to create this sense of like, see, come to me. I know the secret. I know how to get you in the best shape ever. And you only have to do 3 things. It's great marketing, but it's false advertisement. So words like only, best are really like, those are snake oily, because those aren't true. The other thing is you need to spend some time actually looking at who is putting this stuff out there. What is their actual background? If they literally have no background, no education, you should run away very quickly. They literally have no idea.
By running away.
Just because they look good. The thing is, you can't know their reality, especially online. If somebody's posting a bunch of pictures of things, you can't know if it's real or not. It's just like we know now that not everyone, all these people are posting pictures of themselves on private jets, but we know that there's companies that rent hangars that have fake private jets in them. That's right. So, and you can put up a toilet, the ring of the toilet up to simulate it being the window on an airplane, right? A lot of people are trying to trick people to thinking that they're doing something that they're not for that. Yeah. So it's just that it's become all late night infomercials. It's just pervasive now. So it's really, you kind of have to take some time to really be like, okay, I need to think about this. I mean, would you go and, have somebody take care of your car and it was like in some weird place and it looked sketchy and there was no signage and it was just kind of like, wow, this, I'm going to let this person take care of my car. You'd probably be like, no, what's a reputable place to change my tires or whatever like that. We need to start looking at influencer things in that way. They're just better at trying to cover it up and make it seem like they know what they're doing. In reality, it's just a false representation of what it is,
That's a really good point. I've often used for myself, the car analogy of, I would not expect my car to run if I didn't put gas in it and change the oil and get it checked up. So why would I expect me to run if I don't do that?
Yeah.
And, I wouldn't put, juice in the tank, right? Like I would be, so it's same thing. Like I need to put things in my body that are going to benefit it. So I really relate to that. So these are one of your favorite statements. I think all we have is now. Tell me about that.
Love that. I say this to my friends all the time when we hang out. I'm like, the only thing that matters is now, or all we have is now. Like, it doesn't matter what else is going on. What you think is going to happen in the future, or what happened in the past. The only thing that really matters is what's happening now for that. So just be in the present with it. And also don't be too hard on yourself about, where things may be going or may not going. I mean, I haven't been on earth that long, 43 years, but feels like I've lived multiple lifetimes within it, with all the things that I've been working on. And really, a lot of the good things that happen in life, I feel, are just unexpected. A lot of the people you meet, a lot of the situations you get in, it just feels like it's not like you planned it. They're unexpected. And I think, if you're in a situation, you're hanging out with some friends, or you're doing whatever you're doing and it's positive, just enjoy it. Like, don't think, oh, should I have done this yesterday? Or should I be here? Just be in the moment and enjoy it. Just have a great time. It's worth the memories, and create amazing memories more than anything else. And I do that like on vacation with my family. Like, I rarely take pictures when I go on vacation. Rarely. And I told them, we were in San Diego, my wife and my daughter, and I said, remember, no pictures. I want this just to exist in our mind primarily. Like, it's for us. This isn't for us to send to a bunch of other people. Let's let this exist just for us in our mind. All we have is right now. We're the ones experiencing this.
Yeah. I feel that. I feel that. I know when that was the advice. I actually overheard my cousin talking to my grandma about having a baby when I was little, when I was 11 or 12. And my cousin was talking about appreciating the moments. She was like, my first kid, when they wouldn't sleep through the night, I would get very stressed out. And she's like, and then I realized that time's over. And for whatever reason, that stuck with me. And so I would always, my kids were little, I just really worked on like, I don't really want to get up in the middle of the night 14 times, but at some point I'm not going to. And the truth is, like, I'm not saying I miss the like sleep deprivation, but there was a sweetness to some of those times that, because I really embraced like, this is what's happening and I'm not going to get stressed out about it.
Yeah.
Because of my cousin, like, that was so powerful to me to be in that. I think when you can live that way, I think there's a lot of beauty and fulfillment in it.
Yeah,
so.
Most definitely. Yeah, it's literally the most important thing I'm doing is what I'm doing right now with you. Right? That's it. All I have is what I'm doing with you right now. That's all that exists to me right now.
Yeah, no, I feel that. And I feel like that's the power. Like when I was on your show, like you are very present and I value what that brings to people. And that's part of why I wanted to do this with you and talk about like that business as unusual. Like, we are living in difficult times. There's a lot of chaos and change, and that brings with it opportunity. And for me, that's a place I want to focus. I've run into so many different people who are committed to using this opportunity to participate in creating changes that they believe will enhance connection or fitness or community health, and building businesses that are also about including the well-being of the employees. And I'm like, let's try and highlight that as well as the chaotic and upsetting things, not to diminish them or be overly Pollyanna, and also to say we need to know what we're trying to build, the positive. What does an inclusive society look like? What does an economic model that actually works for everyone look like? How do we create healthy societies and communities, as opposed to, I don't like what that guy's doing? Like, that doesn't get us anywhere. Like, cool. Not doing what that guy's doing is certainly one option.
Yeah.
How do we create something? Let's do that. Who's doing it? I want to talk to those people and I want to get their words out there.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I've always kind of jived with what you're about, Isla. I mean, I love kind of the whole kind of this atmosphere that you live in, and how you look at things from different points of view. And I try to be very similar with that, which is why I feel like I try to have this other point of view about fitness. Like, I don't consider myself a fitness person. Like, maybe I'm all crazy about that, but I don't want to be considered a fitness person. Like, I want to be considered someone who is well-rounded and has partaked in a lot of different things in life. I don't want to be pigeonholed into like this game of fitness. Like, there's a lot of other things I like to do, in my life. And so a fitness person is not who I am. I never want to be defined by that, because that's not the essence of who I am as a human being. That should not be defining me. What should be defining me is my faith and spirituality, how I treat other people, the connection I have with important people in my life and with strangers. That's who I am. Fitness is something I do, but it should never be who I am for that. And so I want to be an example of that, other people. And I want to be realistic. I think sometimes we're just not realistic in life. You know, we want things to be a certain way so bad. It's like we want people to be, a lot of my colleagues want people to be in great condition and they're going to save the world and they're going to make all these people incredibly fit. And I'm like the other side of it. I'm like, I'm not sure that's the thing. I really don't think that's the thing. I think people are going to do what they want to do with their bodies. They're going, even if you tell them to the blue in the face, why aren't you exercising? It's not going to make them do it.
Right.
It's like either they're going to or not. And some people are going to want to take that step. And also that some people come to that step later in life. I have plenty of clients who in their 20s would have never thought they would have had a personal trainer, but they're 50 and now they love it. It just takes time sometimes. And some people never do it. It is what it is. You got to work with people that have an idea that they want to do this. Got to be their idea, not your idea. And
yes,
it has to be their idea. It cannot be your idea. And unfortunately, we're in such a large society where we really can't influence the large mass of 360 million people at this point. We just can't do it. If we were a country of 300,000, maybe a little different. That's different. Yeah. But when you reach a certain point of kind of this grandiose largeness, it's very difficult to have a common theme of like, hey, we're going to get most of America in shape. I just don't believe that's possible. I know that sounds negative, but I just don't believe it.
No, I mean, I think I hear what you're saying. I think it goes back a little bit to what I heard you say earlier of you have to have definitions and goals. And if you have a goal that doesn't match with observed reality, then it can be harder to,
I love that observed reality.
Yourself you're like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. And so, yeah, like if you're like, I have been around a lot of people and I've seen consistently, like I can beat my head against the wall of trying to make other people be somewhere super not successful most of the time, or I can accept where they're at and meet them and just continue to live my best life and hopefully help and support the people that are able to connect with how I can show up or what the possibilities are. No, I agree. I don't think we're going to see a much, like you said, like 360 million people. It's a lot, you know? So, one of the other things I was wanting to talk about a little bit is you started this community. It's health focused, but it's also a little bit, from what I understand, antidote to social media. Not for everyone, but for folks that are fitness focused. Do you want to talk a little bit about your goals there, what you're hopeful of, or who should participate? Right, like if someone was like, "Wow, I want to get involved," is this a good way for them to get involved with what you're up to?
I think that it's continuing to evolve and we're very happy with where it's going. It's generally for anybody who is into wellness. I mean, you don't have to be a professional or anything like that. If you want to try to start attacking these different areas of what it means to be well, this is a good starting place because one, you're going to get a very kind group of people who are going to be there for you and encourage you and support you. You're not going to have algorithms or recommendations. It's actually how social media used to be, back in the day when you just looked up and it wasn't creeping on you and like, hey, how about this now, or random sites for shopping. You're like, well, I didn't ask for that, type of thing. It's a private membership-based site. But I think it grew out of, for me, the frustration of the online environment where it currently is. And I was listening to a podcast about this the other day because I feel like we all have like this collective exhaustion of social media. Obviously this is purely my opinion, but just my anecdotally and talking to people, there's a collective exhaustion, but also a collective desire to stay on it because people believe this is how you grow your business. And this, you like almost like you're indentured to it. Well, I don't want to do it. But now I'm in this indentured servant to social media because isn't this how you make money? Isn't this how you grow your brand? And I think we need to get out of that mindset. We need to, because people say, oh, big tech and this stuff. Well, you control big tech. Your usage controls big tech. And if you keep using it at this voracious rate, you're actually the problem. You're using the product over and over again. And they go, thank you. And we're going to keep doing this type of thing. It's like anything. If a bunch of people stopped shopping at Whole Foods. It's like, let's say make believe, blah, blah. If a bunch of people said, I'm no longer shopping at Whole Foods, it's like just people stop going. They wouldn't be in business.
Right.
Like the people actually
Mhm.
have a lot of power. But if you say to yourself things like, well, I can only meet people online. Really? I mean, is that true? Okay, coming out of a time where we're going to be able to, people are now meeting with each other a lot. Yeah, it maybe is more effort to go up to somebody and speak to them in person, but it's not true that you can't create a beautiful community without social media. In fact, I'll
Mhm.
give you a good example. To this morning, I don't usually work on Mondays until the evening time. I spent all morning calling gyms, emailing my colleagues here in Washington State just to say, I want to spend some time with you. I would love to
Mhm.
just sit down and see how I can be supported. Let's have meetings and stuff like that. I use the internet to find information about them, but I wasn't on social media at all to
Mhm.
do this stuff. There's a
Yeah.
way to have success in life without this. And maybe you love it and that's fine. You keep doing it, but you can't complain about it completely if you're the one actually you're part of it. You're consuming. It's the consumption rate that keeps driving these companies. And
Well,
so you have to figure out a way to not always be on it, you know?
mhm. Well, and I'm going to speak to what you were talking about real quickly because it's actually something I do consulting for small businesses, and I often run into this particular conversation around how does social media fit with most of the people that I work with. Often they're very exhausted by using it, right?
Yeah.
Because and one of the things that many of the sites have done is convince so there's a couple things that I have strong feelings about after my experiences of analyzing these trends is one, if you're not paying for it directly with your own dollars,
Mm-hmm.
you're a product, not a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really important thing to understand because as a product, you have no direct control. So if you build that platform, i.e., produce content and engage yourself in building up your followers, what you are doing is building their platform because you are the product.
Mm-hmm.
If you're paying for it, you are part of you're a consumer and they have an interest in meeting the goals that you participate in that platform for. So like I will like I put LinkedIn more in the you're a consumer because you don't
Yeah.
have to pay for it, but you can.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know enough about their full on business model, but like for the most part, I felt like they stay in their lane of
They
what they
do.
said they would do, right? And then things like Facebook. I love Twitter, but they're in that group too. Like you're a product for
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, Facebook, um, YouTube, like all and so that's a distinction that people need to understand is if you're a product, like you said, you have a certain amount of power in that like you could not, buy the ads and stuff. They actually don't really care what you want. They care that
Exactly.
you come on and click a link. If and so I feel like and that's one piece of it. So I have strongly like the folks that I work with, I strongly discourage them from doing anything that requires them to build someone else's platform.
Mm-hmm.
Like you should if you build your email list, join something like FEM, that your health and wellness related, that where you're paying to be part of it,
Mm-hmm.
so you actually know what the real cost is,
Exactly.
as opposed to this because the truth is these other things aren't free, right? Like we've seen the ways in which they cost our society, but they recently with Facebook, the whistleblower made it clear something we all knew anecdotally, but now it's been proven that they absolutely privilege aggressive content because it gets more engagement.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, it's great. But that, it's not surprising because that's how our model is set up. We incentivize that kind of behavior. But yeah, so what you're talking about, like that, no, you don't need social media to, and especially you should, for example, like I said, I love Twitter. I have a lot of fun on it, but I also know how to navigate it to stay in a fairly positive place on it.
Yeah.
And I don't care about my followers. Like when I look at my stats there, it's how many profile visits do I have
Mm-hmm.
and how many folks are engaging with me. And I never try to like build that because if you're trying to build your followers on any of these platforms, what you are doing is building the platform for them. And if they decide to change anything about how they do business, you're dealing with it. And we've seen it
Yeah.
happen we've seen it happen in book publishing apps. We've seen it happen with YouTube. We've seen it happen with Facebook, like businesses that built themselves up using the platform And then they changed their way of doing business, and these people lost so much, or they lost access because they aren't paying for it. It's not actually their product. So it's like, that's why when you were talking about this, I was like, wow, you're doing this. This is such a great idea. And I think it's the way to go. I think personally, like having an online digital place, like I use Facebook to keep track of old friends, but I don't really get on it anymore because I find that I'm much happier when I don't.
Of course you are. Of course you are. But you know what the hard thing is like there's this inertia that humans have. It's hard to move people off things that is like, it's like in them. So like you can talk to so many people and they can tell you they hate Facebook, but they haven't gotten off of it. Like how many things do you hate that you keep in your life? Like if you truly hate something, don't you get rid of it? You're like, I need to get this evil out of my life. This is bad. But sometimes we get this weird relationship with hate. We're like, we may hate something, but we keep inviting it into our life all over and over again. Like if it's that toxic for you, you can find other ways to stay in touch with people. You really can. You can exist. And I feel for the younger people because like they haven't known a life without this. And but the people like my age and your age, a life without this. You know how to do this. You know how to do this. You can use your phone for actually calling people.
Like, no, you can.
You really can.
I can pick it up and talk to people.
You can talk to people.
A few years ago, one of my friends called me and I was in a big texting phase. Like I totally had gotten into it. And I was like, why is she calling me? Is it an emergency? And I was like, I pick up, she's like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, what's going on? She's like, I just wanted to say hi. I'm like, oh, right. People do that. It was amazing.
Yeah, you can do it. You can all do it. You have people's phone numbers. We can go back. But I just wanted to be someone who was like, I'm going to actually do it. I'm going to get off all these things. I'm going to create something else. And I would say, in all honesty, it's definitely a hard thing to do because when you present something like what we're doing with FEM and you tell people it costs money, it immediately turns them off because they think I'm doing these other things for free. And I'm like, no, you're not. But they don't see it that way. They just think I just go in and I say whatever I want, blah, blah, blah. So I think our biggest uphill battle is just trying to find people who see the value and go, wait a minute, the light bulb goes on. Ooh, wait a minute. This is better for me. And if you pay for something, you're going to pay different attention to it. But you got to be willing to take a risk, which is why we always offer a free month for people to try it out. And now you don't lose anything by trying it for a month. You literally can just be like, I'll try this for a month. If you think it sucks, no big deal. You just leave type of thing. It's not something like, let's get you in my clutches. And then you just keep paying every month. Oh, so evil. No, we tell you on the site, there's a video tutorial that tells you how to delete your account specifically. Like there's no tricks. Press this button, you can be done. We don't want you here if you don't want to be here. But you got to give it a chance if you want to have a different experience. Don't say you're exhausted by something. And when somebody presents you a different opportunity, you go, well, I've just been on there a long time. I got all these other people that are following me and stuff. I'm like, take a chance. Have some courage. Your life will go on without these things. It will. It will go on.
Yeah, and that's great. And maybe this is what you were saying, but like, what's your best advice that you either received or have given or comes to you in this moment?
Best advice is to always be nice to people. Always be nice. Yeah, like even in all of my years in my work, in my personal life, always be nice. Even when you have a difficult conversation, if it's done in a way that is even nice or just constructive, the blow lands less heavy when you do it that way. It doesn't mean you're not angry and stuff, but you can be nice about things. If somebody bothers you, you can say, that really hurt my feelings. It bothered me. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe it wasn't, but I just want to let you know, like it bothered me. Versus like, what the hell are you doing? Why did you push me? Which reaction is going to be better? Like people have a hard time when they get in the presence of someone and they're nice with them. It breaks down the walls for them. They have a much more difficult time being hateful to someone that is nice to them. And listen, if you're just mean to people who are nice to you, you're probably evil. at that point. I mean, it's like, it's because it's very difficult to be nasty to someone who's directly nice to you over and over again. You got a
Yeah.
serious issue if that's the case. But generally in my life, I've seen that when you're nice to people and you smile at people, they're nice back to you. This world of like all this divisiveness and these arguing, of course people are arguing. They're shouting at each other. What's peaceful about
Yeah.
that? Like if two people shout at each other, it's a guarantee it's going to be drama. Guarantee.
Yeah.
So I always think just be nice to people and be a good example of sanity to other people.
Hmm.
Like be a good example of like even keeled, moderate ideas. Like you don't have to live in this world of extremism. I know it's
Right.
popular right now, but the place you want to be is in a very moderate mindset where you can see maybe both sides of the things and look at it and go, okay, there's maybe some merit in this idea. The delivery is probably not the best, but I understand what you're trying to do for that.
Yeah. That's great, actually. I think then, especially timely, I would say,
Yeah.
because there's so much going on that feels it's very easy to get reactive and worked up. And
Yeah.
so it's a good
Which is
reminder.
why I never get in comments online with people. When people have like they get into these big spats online with people and they
Mhm.
write back all these crazy things. I'm like, honestly, you should never do that. You should never
Mhm.
lower yourself to these ridiculous conversations. Even if you feel so passionate, the point is your emotions are going to get going and you're just creating drama for that. You know what you say? I have a different opinion about this. Can we get on a phone call and discuss this? Again, I want someone closer to me so they can see me or video and they can feel my emotion and we can have a civilized conversation. But I think it's pointless to be commenting on all this stuff and getting in crazy war of words.
Yeah.
Like it's anybody that I know that's been really successful in life has never done anything like that ever. Like they don't even give
Yeah.
it a thought to go on message boards and comment and be like, you're wrong. It's like, I see there's a very poor quality, like avoid it.
Yeah. No, I think that's good advice. It just amps you up. Well, and they've shown repeatedly that it does make a difference. Like if I'm in a space and I'm talking to you, I'm much more likely to think about you,
Yeah.
right, as a person. Whereas
Yes.
if it's words on a screen, I may not be thinking about that. So something I would never say to a human in my world, I might type at you. And it's an understandable disconnection, but it doesn't lead to the early days of the internet. There was this hope like more interaction would create more engagement, and there are places where it does happen, but it,
Yeah.
like you said, like there's this other piece.
Yeah.
um what's the best way if somebody wants to get connected to you or know what's up with you or get involved? Is your website, the fem community?
I would say good old fashioned email is very
Yeah.
easy for me. Darian Parker at gmail.com is an easy way to contact me. I'm on my email quite a bit. I respond to it. Um, LinkedIn's a great place. I'm on there. It's the only media that I use online at this
Hmm.
point, primarily. And so, I post things about my podcast and stuff. Checking out my podcast is another good way. If you want to get a feel for me, podcast is a great way for that because I'm always posting a discussion I had on my podcast every single week. We had like 429 episodes, so plenty of content to listen
Yeah.
to and to learn a little bit
Yeah.
more about me. DrDarianParker.com. My podcast is on there and all major platforms, but I'm easy to get in touch with. And I think one of the
Yeah.
things for me is I pride myself on getting back to people. I will never leave you hanging. I will never ghost you ever. You deserve better than that. Respecting your time is important. If somebody reaches out to me and actually spends the time, because I know it's hard to reach out to people. You're fearful of, oh, they're going to ghost me or they're going to reject me. No
Hmm.
matter what it is, even on LinkedIn where people constantly send me weird MLM stuff
Yeah.
and all these crazy business ideas, no matter how crazy it is, I always get back to them and say, I appreciate you contacting me. I don't have an interest, but I want to respect the effort and time you put into this for that. So
Yeah.
that's important to me.
I value that. I really appreciate that. as a commitment in the world. I think that's a powerful thing to do, actually, to show up and say, hey, I see you. It's not for me. I know that. And I still see you. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's those little, and that's actually a lot of effort. I'm not going to try to dismiss that, but it's those little moments where you can really see a difference in the world. Like if you commit to certain things like that, it can really make, over time, I don't know. I'm all about incremental change. I think it lasts longer.
Yeah, most
and
definitely.
that's one of those things that feels like that incremental change. Was there anything else that you want to share before we say thanks for joining us?
No, I think that's it. What a great conversation, Aisel. I appreciate you greatly, and I love what you're doing. And thanks for asking me to be on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I like same, and I love the way that you bring so much to the table. In a couple weeks, I'm gonna have I'll put this up here so people can see Maria Velasco on. She is the CEO and founder of Beyond Inclusion. I met her several years ago when we were both doing trainings in Boulder County, and just learned so much from her back then. I'm excited to see what we'll learn from her in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
So thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.